Hello and welcome to part 2 of this WJTS Inform on how to protect your children from predators, as we're talking with Tammy Lampert with SWICAC. Now, last night she was here and talked a little bit about part of the presentation that you make as part of this training that you will go through for folks, that it's available to you. But we're going to go through some more parts of this presentation, but by no means is this the presentation.
No.
This is just parts of it and selected parts that you've gone through, and there's so much more. And there's also a lot of interaction between you and folks that are there, so if they have actual questions, they can ask you things if they need to.
Yes.
This presentation is part of what? Let's kind of reintroduce this presentation.
So
we're in part 2 here on WJTS.
So this presentation, it's a training that was developed by Corey Jewel Jensen, which she is a national presenter and has over 35 years of research and working with sex offenders. And so during some of her work with the sex offenders, one of the projects was for them to explain what they do to and how they get away with molesting children.
This is a kind of an uncomfortable subject, and some of the things that I'm sure that they tell you are just like eye-opening, but also scary.
Yes, and I will say that so the presentation's done by SWICAC staff and local detectives, investigators, and we always say too that, I've been through the training, probably, maybe 5 times now, and it's still, there's still parts of it that get to me, and we work these jobs every day, and so, if anything triggers anything or upsets you or brings back any kind of trauma or anything, we want people to talk about it. We want people to seek help. And so one of the ways they can do that is Crisis Connection is a great victim advocacy agency, and they provide resources for abuse victims. And so they would be a great resource and somebody to reach out to if anybody watching the program needs any type of support.
Okay, now we're going to continue with some of that presentation today. Some things we may have covered last night, but we're going to cover some new things today, and some of it may even be a little bit of a repeat of lessons from yesterday. But this is all part of a presentation that you will do with a group. If they want you to come in and talk to them, it's about a 2-hour presentation.
About 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours. Yeah. Okay.
And so in the presentation that we do, there's actual videos of sex offenders being interviewed and again, saying how they get away with it. And so I know, this opportunity is to educate the community as best as we can, that if you see something, say something. If a child discloses to you, report it. Believe the child and report it. And then let the investigation take the place of what it needs to do to make sure that child's safe.
Okay, and like you mentioned last night, dual report.
Yes, dual report.
Report to the Department of Child Services and to the local law enforcement.
Yes, okay. Always dual report. Sex offenders are really good at manipulating the adults, just the same as they do the kids. They, in the presentation, you'll hear to where the sex offender actually, trying to find the right words for it, he actually befriended and manipulated and groomed the adult before he even did anything with the child, with the whole mindset that this is what I need to do first to get to the child. And so, some things that they do is, they buy gifts. They make the adult and or the family or the child dependent upon them. They almost act as like a child, like they're that friendly, wrestling, maybe don't have any kids of their own, but they know all the latest fads of the kids. And so they interject themselves with that end goal in mind of getting access to the child. It's funny because some of the things they ask is, how did you keep them from telling? And he was like, I don't know that I even told them not to tell, both to the child and to the adult. It was just kind of an unspoken thing that they knew about, that they knew that they shouldn't tell. It was our special bond. It was our special relationship. And then if I did get questioned by an adult, they would say things like, it was an accident. I made a mistake. Don't call the police. It's going to ruin my life. I promise I'll get help. It won't happen again. It was only one time. And these are just all the lies that they feed, you know, the adults and the children around them to continue molesting children. We hear a lot of stories about how many times they were caught before they were reported. And I always find that to be so interesting, to where, you know, a child told on them, but nobody believed them and they discredited the child, went on to another child. And so it's crazy to me that they can have so many victims before they're even arrested. That part just, it baffles me every time.
Well, like you mentioned yesterday, 120 contacts or maybe people that they've done before they even get caught?
Yes, 120 to 200 acts.
Wow.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of times people say, well, you know, because the sex offender will say, I'll get treatment, I'll go to whatever. You know, does treatment work? No, it doesn't. I mean, that is their sexual preference. Their sexual preference is children. And so while treatment may reduce their reoffending, if it does, it only does by like 3 to 40%. So again, I know we talked about last night, but I want to make sure I say it again. They should never be left alone with children. That's it. That's how you can prevent more molestations, is they have been accused of being a child molester. They were, even if they weren't arrested, if they were accused of it, they should never be left alone with children again. And so that's something that we hit very, very hard on, in a way that people can protect their kids. You know, what doesn't work is us only educating the children. That doesn't work. It's the adult's responsibility to make sure the kids are safe. So if we think, you know, well, this program or this school or whatever is talking to my kids about it, I don't have to. Big mistake. The other thing is that, and the child molesters like rely on this. They rely on the adults not talking to the kids. They rely on the adults being uncomfortable. And if you're not talking to your kids about child abuse or safe boundaries, safe relationships, they will swoop in and they will do it for you. And so while an adult may be uncomfortable talking to their child about sex or sex abuse or safe boundaries, do you want the child molester to do it for you? I mean, that's the flip side. And they will. Yeah. They will. And, you know, you think about if, you know, the children that don't have adequate supervision or they've not been taught like appropriate boundaries, and, you know, that their space and their body is their space and their body. Sex offenders can pick up on that, and they'll sweep right on in. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, again, we just need to talk about it. And by talking about it, your kids are going to know that they're safe to come tell you about it, that they're not going to be the one that's in trouble for it, because they're the child and the molester is the adult. Or if it's an older child, you know, you want them to tell so that the abuse doesn't continue, so they can get support and they can get resources. And, you know, kids can be okay if it's a positive end, if they get the support, they get the resources they need, they're kept safe from further abuse, they can be okay. And so, but in order for them to be okay, we have to put those things in place. We have to report it. We have to keep them safe and get them the treatment and the counseling and therapy that they need. You know, we talk about some things that don't work, of not talking to your kids or thinking that nobody could be a child molester, but things that do work is educating yourself, talking to the kids, being aware, looking for those red flags, reporting it if you see something, trusting your instincts, you know. Trust your gut. If something's not right,
you kind of know.
Yeah, you know, ask. And, you know, I hear so many stories of victims, child victims, that they never told until somebody asked them. It was just as simple as, did somebody do something not okay? Or, you know, I thought this was really weird. Has something like this happened before? And until they're asked, a lot of times they won't say. And so, you know, don't ignore it. Don't think it's going to go away. Do something about it. I know we always go back to the if you see something, say something, but it's really that. Act on it. Report it. Talk to the kids. You know, and we always, like, whenever we do our trainings, we always say, you know, go talk to your family about this. Go talk to your friends about this. Let them know that there are education and there's tools out there to help you better protect the children. And also, you know, if you don't know who the offenders are in your life yet, it also puts them aware that you're paying attention, you're getting educated, and you're going to be looking for things. You know, a lot of times sex offenders, they are pillars in the community. They are respected individuals. They're helpful, they're polite, you know, they're involved in all the kids' activities when maybe they don't have kids, or they, you know, have a tendency to try and put themselves in one-on-one situations with kids, and as opposed to being with a group or being with other adults. And that's something that, like, agencies and organizations and businesses and everyone can do. You can implement to where no two people are left alone when it comes to an adult and a child. I mean, that's something that is pretty easily done, to where if you have, you know, some type of kids group or something like that, always have two adults. Always make sure there's not just one kid and one adult, or one older kid and one younger kid. And then you can reduce the opportunity by doing that. You know, we talk a lot about how, I think we focus a lot on how they groom and what they do to the kids. But I think we need to really open our eyes up to they do the same thing to the adults. They do groom the adults as well. And so by educating ourselves, we're going to know those things to look for. It's funny because, like, in the presentation, my detectives and our staff's probably going to say I shouldn't have given this part away. But in our presentation, you know, there's a picture of a frog, and he's in a pot of water, okay? And you think about it to where what it symbolizes is if you put the frog in boiling water, it's going to jump right out. But if you put it in, you know, cool, comfortable, warm water, and it slowly heats up, it's going to continue to stay in that water because it's not going to know that it's boiling hot until it's too late. And so that is a really good representation of how they groom the children and the adults. They don't do something horrible and painful and outlandish right away at the beginning, because they want to earn their trust. They want to stay in the picture and develop a relationship with them so that they can carry out the abuse. You know, a lot of times kids are scared that they're not going to be believed. And so it's the investigator's job to figure out the investigation and what happened, right? So we should believe kids when they tell us. I think only 2 to 5% of allegations are false allegations. And when you look at that, 2 to 5% are false allegations. Why wouldn't you believe the kids when they tell you?
95% of the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And so, you know, when you have those conversations with your kids, not only do you tell them that you can tell me, or do you have 5 safe adults that you can tell, you know, we'll believe you and we will help you, so that they know that is a safe person that they can go to about it, and that person will help them get the help that they need. Again, if a child is abused, report it, report it, report it, report it to your local law enforcement, report it to your Department of Child Services hotline, which is 800-800-5556. Believe the child, support the child, get the child services. You know, everyone is a mandatory reporter of abuse. Everyone. So that doesn't mean that you have to have physical evidence and proof and anything else. It just means if you suspect that a child is being abused, report it.
And that's that simple.
It's that simple.
But this presentation is available now, if anybody would like to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And you have one more slide yet?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, you do. You have a million slides.
I have,
you have a lot of slides as part of this presentation. We've only, like, touched on a very small part of it, really.
Very, very small part of it. I
And
mean,
they
it's a
should
2.5 hour presentation. It's a great presentation. It's a hard presentation to sit through because it's a lot of content, but it gives you tools and an understanding in a way that I've never seen. And we will do that for, groups, teachers, civic organizations. We just really want to educate the community. And it's funny because I'll have one of our investigators will say, not only do we want to investigate the community, we don't want to have jobs in child abuse, we want to be out of work. We want to protect these kids. And we also want to educate our juries as well so that they understand that, it's not a CSI TV show. Very rarely, I think I've talked to like around 900 kids, okay? And out of 900 kids, I think that there were 2 that I can remember that told right away. And that relationship with the offender was not as close, and we'll see that. We'll see the closer the relationship, the longer it is until they tell someone. And so, by educating the community, we keep our kids safe. We prevent kids from being abused longer or future victims, and then we also do educate to where if you have a case that the child disclosed, the detective, did the investigation and it got charged and got to that point, it takes a lot to get to that point. We talk about in the training about, oh my gosh. Oh, I couldn't even tell you the percentage of charges and convictions that there should be, but because of lack of evidence or lack of education of the community and things like that, they're not convicted. And so when you look at what all it takes to get to that point, nobody just made it up and went with it. And so to educate the community, the adults, the juries, we can really improve the safety of our communities.
And it's really simple. Just contact Tammy through SWICAC. You got a Facebook page, you got a website?
We got a Facebook page, we got a website. Email is swicac@gmail.com. That's the easiest way to contact me. And then either one of our staff or the detectives, somebody would come and do that presentation.
Okay. It's available free of charge?
Free of charge.
Free of charge. Just everything we can do to protect our children.
Yes.
Tammy Lampert, the director of SWICAC, has been our guest talking about how to protect your children from predators. This is the second part of a 2-part series. Thank you for joining us. Tammy, thank you for coming and spending time with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching WJTS. We are local people watching local people.